to day 2 of the Fight Food Waste Limited annual conference. My name is David Pearson, and I have the profound privilege and enormous challenge of leading the Engage program. The Engage program is focused on talking with government and industry to identify problems that can be addressed through research, development, and extension activities that require changes in behaviour so that less food is wasted. And these changes in behaviour are required in both businesses and in households. Our time together today is broken into 4 sections. First, we have a keynote presentation. This will be followed by presentations on the research being undertaken by our students. Then I will give an overview of activities over the last year in the Engage program. And finally, we have the panel discussion. The keynote presentation will be given by Dr. Gamithri Karunasena. Gami, after a career in industry, which included being a brand manager for Nestlé, for the last 2 years has been managing what is affectionately known in Fight Food Waste CRC as the Household Project. I would ask that you keep any questions and type them into the Q&A, and Gami will have a chance to answer them during the panel discussion. Over to you, Gami.
Thank you, David. It's a pleasure to be here with you to share some of the findings of the Household Project of the CRC. Within the Household Project, we emphasize the rigorousness of the methodology, and we boast about the careful decision-making that is put into delivering these results. At the center of this quality control process lies the experience from those who have been active in this space for many years, and their experience is put into this. They represent organizations such as international experts such as RAP, federal government, state and territory governments, food rescue charities, supermarkets, and universities. And with this, the backing of the steering committee, we were entrusted to delivering 7 research work packages. And I'm very happy to share with you and boast about this. To date, we have completed all those 7 work packages. And this resulted in 13 research reports on household food waste in Australia. Work package 5, 6, and 7 of these reports will be published by the end of this year. These research outputs tells us and answers the questions around what, who, why, and how about food waste in Australia. They also direct us towards possible interventions that we could implement to reduce household food waste in Australia. In the next couple of slides, I'll be presenting the key findings from these work packages. Let's first try to understand what food has been wasted in Australia during the past. From our research, we identified 2 main categories, as you can see. Meat and seafood, fresh vegetables and herbs are the top 2 categories that we need to focus on if we're developing category-specific interventions. If you're looking at product-based interventions, we've analyzed the data further, and out of 745 products that were wasted by consumers based on an electronic diary, we ranked top 15 products that had based on value, how it contributes to the value of food waste. And based on this analysis, we know cooked beef, bread rolls, and cheese are the top 3 products that add to the value of food being wasted, the dollar value. When it comes to the weight of the food waste, it's sliced bread, bananas, and milk that ranks the top 3. So we know what categories and what products to focus on if we want to develop interventions which are either category or product specific. Then we moved on to analyzing what behaviors were linked to food waste. We looked at top 12 behaviors that were correlated to high food waste and top 6 behaviors that were correlated to low food waste, so lowering food waste. Based on this analysis and the help of experts, we've identified 7 behaviors that you can see on the screen to prioritize for Australia in order to reduce household food waste. They are ordered based on their impact on food waste. If we're looking at, for example, preparing appropriate amounts, which is the top most influential behavior and priority for us, the interventions can be a simple communication around getting consumers to check their family's hunger levels before cooking their meals, or it can even be portion controllers on a web application. When it comes to plan for changes in plan, we need to get consumers to think of planning for 3 to 4 days and letting the next day or 2 become their leftover days, so that they eat their leftovers that results from changing in their plans. The next one, which is leftovers, is the next top rated priority for us, which is also linked to the previous one as well. For this one, it can be something simple as sharing recipes around the most wasted products, such as cooked beef, chicken, bread, milk, or bananas. Or it can be something sophisticated as having an app or a smart fridge which sends a message to the consumers reminding them to eat their food. So these are the top priorities for us. So the next step is for the stakeholders to take up some of the interventions to try to reduce food waste in Australia. In the next phase of the research, we focused on profiling the household food wasters. Based on a behavior-based segmentation analysis, we identified 3 categories: overproviders, underplanners, and considerate planners. And the recommendation was to focus on the overproviders, who are generally families with young kids, and they start with a meal plan, but when they go to the shops, they purchase more, and when they cook more, and they don't eat their leftovers. So the recommendation here is focusing on them. And if you're looking at what we know from this is, if you're looking at a mass market campaign, we know what behaviors to focus on. But if you're looking at a segmented approach, we know who are the target audiences we need to focus on and what behaviors drive their food waste. The need is to help them reduce that food waste by improving those weaknesses and helping them with those weaknesses. Then we looked at what message frames would work well, would resonate well with the consumers. And we identified 3 messages that appeal to the masses and 1 message that was more segment specific. We found the hook to grabbing consumers' attention, to listening to some of the food waste messaging would be the monetary benefit that they would gain out of saving food waste, reducing food waste. So looking at this screen, you can see the top 4 messages. Saving money came as the top most rated behavior message, and this focuses on the dollar value or the percentage of money saved by reducing food waste. And this focused on the gain consumers would get based on reducing their food waste in households. The next one is also connected to the monetary benefit, which is avoid throwing money in the bin. But the focus of this particular message was to avoid the lost avoidance, so that getting consumers to think of, I need to stop wasting money, and as a result of that, people will start reducing their food waste. The third top-rated message was save water, land, and other resources that go into producing the food that we eat. The interesting thing here was when we did the qualitative investigations, that informed us if we focus on CO2 emission or greenhouse gas emission for that matter, the concentration of the consumers would then be taken to a bigger problem like climate change. And they felt that they didn't have the confidence to make an impact or make a change to that problem by reducing food waste. So the message was deviated, the concentration went away from food waste to a climate change problem, and then consumers felt they couldn't really do something about it. So we know if we're focusing on an environment kind of a message, we know what to focus on and also what might not work as well. The last message, the fourth message, is setting a good example to your family and your friends. And as I said, this is a segment-specific message where the most people who resonated with this message represented families with kids, naturally. Then the next stage was the final work package is the measurement methodologies. We focused on developing measurement methodologies to evaluate the effectiveness of priority interventions that we proposed in the previous slides. Why is it important to measure the impact? We know globally it has been a weakness in consumer behavior, food waste related consumer behavior campaigns, that there is lack of pre and post evaluations, meaning we don't know whether some of these interventions actually created the impact that it planned to deliver, whether there was a behavior change or not, and whether there was a reduction in food waste or not, or whether we don't even know in some of the cases whether that was an enduring change. That is why it is important to measure the impact. There are three commonly used measurement tools in the world: surveys, electronic diaries, and bin audits. If you look at the surveys, these are easy to use, cost effective, but the issue here is when you get the reported number from surveys, they are underreporting the value. So it underestimates the food waste considerably. If you look at the electronic diaries, these are easy to implement when it is designed. However, it takes most of the time from the consumers to fill this information for 7 days at least. But it also takes a lot of researchers' time to analyzing the data because it comes in a complex form. The good thing about electronic diary is we get to investigate what products have been wasted. And that's how we came up with that 15 product top most wasted products. So the e-diary looks at individual products like what is being wasted. Is it cooked beef? It is cooked chicken or bread or whatnot. But also electronic diaries helps us to understand where the disposal route is, and it gives us information about all disposal routes, such as the bins, composting, worm farming, or whether people fed the food to the pets, or whether it was just tipped down the sink. The other one is the last tool is the bin audits. This is considered as a more effective way of identifying food waste. But the issue with bin audits is unless it's done jointly with the council, bin audits are generally really expensive. Also, bin audit only captures just one form of disposal. The other methods, such as feeding to pets, composting, tipping down sink, are not captured in bin audits. So what we did was, based on this comparison, we knew there were more easier methods to use, but they were not as efficient as some of the other methods. So what we did was, by comparing these three methods, we came up with a scaling factor. What this means is if a practitioner uses a survey to evaluate the effectiveness of a particular intervention that was implemented, they can use the survey, but the number you derive from the survey, say in this case, what you see on the slide is the weight is 2.04. That number needs to be multiplied by 1.7 to arrive at a more accurate number for the food waste. Same goes for electronic diary. The number you arrive at using electronic diary needs to be adjusted or multiplied by 1.2, which is a scaling factor for electronic diaries, to arrive at a more accurate number for food waste. So within these 7 work packages, what we've done is we've identified what categories are wasted most. We've identified the products that are wasted most. We know why what behaviors are driving these products, as well as in general waste, food waste in Australia. And then we recommended 7 behaviors that needs to be prioritized for Australia to generate the greatest impact on food waste. Then we looked at whom to target if we're going for a segmented approach. We looked at what messages would resonate well with the consumers. And finally, we came up with methodologies to evaluate the effectiveness of the interventions that practitioners would take up or implement. So where to from this? I think from here, these insights need to be used to simplify the behaviors and communicate to consumers. These are easy behaviors for them to adopt. And when we are communicating, we need to pick few messages and amplify those messages, then deliver a consistent message repetitively without competing messages, and so that we can help consumers to stop wasting food in Australia. Thank you very much. Over to you, David.
I can sense the breadth and rigour of the research that Gami has been leading. It is the most comprehensive research ever undertaken in Australia on food waste in households. And I look forward to hearing more about how that can be used by practitioners in the panel discussion. It is now my pleasure to move to the next section, where we will be hearing from the bright minds who have been successful in winning a generous Fight Food Waste CRC top-up scholarship. These students are undertaking research at one of the 8 Fight Food Waste CRC partner universities. In addition to their studies, all of these students are part of the Future Leaders program. This is being led by Dr. Olav Muurlink at Central Queensland Uni and a team of people led by Dr. Tangerine Holt from KPMG. In addition to receiving bespoke professional development training, the Future Leaders program is providing a forum for students to share and support each other. Over to you, Olav.
Thanks very much, David. And yeah, look, it's a real pleasure for me to introduce this section. It's fairly a nerve-wracking moment, though, for me, because we've got 16 students presenting from 8 different universities in 4 different time zones in about 35 minutes. So it's going to be quite interesting. As David said, I work with Tangerine Holt from University of Melbourne as well as KPMG. And, you know, at times we feel a little bit like we're the hosts of a kind of game show, which is often the result of working in the pandemic with Zoom sessions. But it's been wonderful over the last year and a half of constrained actual contact to see how the students have learnt to support each other. And, you know, great science is never done solo these days, and great impact is always done in terms of a team. So without much further ado, I'd like to kick things off. The students have been given pretty strict marching orders to do 2 minutes, and they'll be given a warning to cut off at that point. Please do take the opportunity to take down their name if they say something interesting that you feel you can comment on. There'll be the students have been asked actually to pitch a problem that they need help with. So think of this as kind of like an academic speed dating where, you know, you pick a student to reach out to assist. So I'll just start by sharing my screen. There we go. And there's the list of students, and we're going to start off with Ruby from RMIT University. Go for it, Ruby.
Hello, everyone. So my research focuses on finding ways to improve packaging to help consumers waste less food at home. Primary packaging plays a key role to help reduce food waste, and it does that in quite a few different ways. One of the key ones being to protect food so that it stays fresh and safe to eat for longer. And there are many different packaging features and functions that can help with this, but I'm focusing on reclosable and resealable packaging, especially within the context of household food storage. So the first part of my project is to find out from consumers how they use reclosable and resealable packaging, and especially what does or doesn't work. Lately, I've been interviewing consumers, but that's only one part of the picture. I'll also be turning to the food and beverage packaging industry, which plays a key role in the development and market availability of these packaging. So here is my ask. I would love to interview any of you who work in the food and beverage packaging industry and play a part in developing or specifying reclosable or resealable packaging products. Or if you've got some contacts or know anybody who might be interested, I would love to hear from you. They will go for around 45 minutes, and I'm looking to do them in February next year online. So if you're interested and have something to say, please contact me. Thank you.
That's brilliant, Ruby. And Ruby was our very first future leaders with the program. So next we're going to hear from Trang.
Thanks, Olav. My PhD project sets out to understand factors that are associated with food waste quantity and sort separation at households. In the survey, we partner with Eastways. I know Rob is here, so I want to thank Rob and Eastways for the support to my research. The preliminary results show convenience, perceived benefits, and recycling habits are key factors that associate with those who correctly sort food waste. So drawing your attention to households with children, my research has found that they have a lower sort separation rate of food waste and recycle less. So is there a way we can influence these households through their kids? Therefore, I'm looking for a mentor to help me with interventions that can promote the benefits of reducing and diverting food waste from landfill through engagement with schools. The key benefits of this intervention is that it will support the net zero target that has been taught in schools recently. If there are partners interested in this idea, please contact me. Also, I'm happy to serve as a volunteer or intern for your consumer-based education campaigns on food waste reduction so that I can have a hand-on experience. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Trang. And now we'll turn to Roland, who's from RMIT.
Thanks, Olav, and hi, everyone. My research explores how organizations make decisions for reducing food waste. Based on the initial research findings and subsequent manuscript under review, integrating tools can allow food businesses to improve resource efficiency by advancing their understanding of the food supply chain dynamics. What is less clear is how tools are used to enhance organizational decisions, its barriers and enablers in making decisions. My research is using a case study approach to gain an in-depth understanding of the food-based issue in its real-life context through multiple case studies. I'm looking for domestic and international organizations to participate in my research. Specifically, I'm looking for practitioners who can provide insights into how integrating and using tools can improve decisions. Through practitioner online-based interviews, we will discuss how you and your organization make decisions about food waste and the tools used. Additionally, I would like to explore what factors are considered in decisions and the challenges practitioners face. I anticipate that the whole interview process will be around 1 hour to complete. Should you be interested in this research, I'm happy to discuss it further with you. Thank you. Over to you, Olav.
Thanks very much, Roland. And next up, we're going to hear from Jack from University of Adelaide and CSIRO. Thanks, Jack.
Thanks, Olav. So Roland and I have pretty similar topics, so looking at decision support tools. And so I guess the way I'm approaching it is looking at, okay, a food business have a number of different management options. And many of you will have seen this food waste hierarchy, which kind of provides different management options for businesses, decision makers to consider. And I guess where decision support tools come in, they can really help a decision maker calculate what are the benefits and the impacts on people, planet, profit, and help predict the potential impacts of their decisions, or even identifying the optimal choice. And so where I'm coming in is I've initially planned to evaluate tools that currently exist with the needs of the industry in mind, and either apply a tool and test it, or if something isn't out there that fits the need, then try and develop one. And so what I'm asking for today is to work with, to find an industry partner or a supervisor to help with my research. So very much looking at people within the industry, whether it's primary production, processing, even retail, so to help work with them. I'd even love to hear from businesses that are currently using tools like this, tools that can help them identify what are optimum ways of managing their food waste. Really love to have people reach out to me, or even introductions to people you think might be interested. Thanks very much, Olav.
That's brilliant, Jack. Thanks very much. And now we'll go to Khulud, who is from my university, Central Queensland University.
Thanks, Olav. My research problem is how can Australian food rescue organisations enhance their stakeholder engagement to improve food distribution capacity? So why is my study important? Research is generally focused on the supply side of the non-profit supply chain, with a particular emphasis being put on donors and grant seekers as influential stakeholders. I'm focusing on the delivery side of the food rescue non-profit supply chain, with a particular focus on the challenges that exist for food rescue organisations like Food Bank when engaging with volunteers, managers, employees and partnering charities. This is important as volunteers, managers and employees and partnering charities are the ones making sure that food is being delivered to more recipients in need of food aid. So what I've already done is my study involves qualitative interviews and focus groups and a quantitative survey with volunteers and partnering charities. I've conducted interviews and focus groups with 4 partnering charity representatives in regional and rural New South Wales, and I've interviewed 3 employees and managers from New South Wales, South Australia and Queensland so far. However, I seek assistance in the following areas: more access to interviews and focus group with food bank volunteers, particularly corporates and partnering charities across Australia. This can include New South Wales, Victoria, South Australia, Queensland or Northern Territory. A combination of rural, regional, metropolitan, small, large, affiliated and non-affiliated partnering charities is also needed to gain different opinions on the topic. So given that the next stage of my research will also involve a quantitative survey with volunteers and partnering charities, findings of my study will become more generalizable. Therefore, I'm seeking partners to apply the practical recommendations from my study to other Australian food rescue organisations. This means that more can be done to reduce food insecurity across Australia. Thank you, and on to you, Olav.
Thanks very much, Khulud. That's brilliant. Next up, we've got Joe, actually, also from Central Queensland University. Go for it, Joe.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here. This master's project will explore opportunities for supermarkets to be superheroes in the fight against household food waste, and it's wonderful to see already the high levels of collaboration and engagement from supermarkets in the food waste area. Australian supermarkets hold a unique position and have unprecedented superpowers in relation to reaching, understanding, interacting, and influencing a large number of households on a frequent basis. Supermarkets have the potential to be superheroes in the fight against household food waste through insight-driven interventions that target both high-waste households and problematic food behaviours. I'll be exploring shopper insights amongst high-waste households to understand the type of support they want from supermarkets to help them reduce their food waste. This will be done through in-depth qualitative interviews, and I'm driving for 3 outcomes. Firstly, to understand the consumer expectations of the role of supermarkets. Secondly, testing food waste intervention concepts and, where relevant, the purchase intentions, the price sensitivity, the loyalty and reputation associated with these interventions. And lastly, delivering a recommendation supermarkets might find useful in this space. I'm in the very early stages of the project and am open to input from anyone with experience in real-world retail consumer interventions, ideally from marketing or sustainability functions. This input can take many forms, for example, sharing learnings from previous interventions, ideas on recruitment, just to name a few. Who knows, perhaps having input into this project is another superpower supermarkets can share. Back to you, Olav.
Thanks very much, Jo. And now we do have Roanna, who's from QUT. Oh, sorry, yeah, QUT. Go for it, Roanna.
Thanks, Olav. So as a process engineer, I'm curious about how the environmental impacts of biorefining compare to more common management options, such as landfilling, composting, anaerobic digestion, or feeding to animals. So far, I found that the relative environmental impacts of biorefining less common energy products, such as pyrolysis products, and non-energy products, such as essential oils, acids, bioactive compounds, these have not been adequately researched yet. So what does this mean? Well, it means that when advising biorefining processes for food waste management, we generally don't know how the environmental impacts compare. Therefore, the inclusion of many biorefining processes within the waste management frameworks is uncertain. During my PhD, I'm looking at the environmental and economic impacts of biorefining food losses into useful products. I hope to use this information to improve the waste management frameworks. I'm working with my industry partner, Carter and Spencer, to conduct a case study with citrus losses. Now, I'm looking for anyone who is currently biorefining food wastes, especially if you're producing non-energy products, such as chemicals or oils, proteins, bioactive compounds. I'm not seeking any commitments, but rather just an opportunity to connect casually and learn more about your process and your product. Thank you.
That's brilliant, Roanna. Thanks very much. And next up, we do have Shan from University of Queensland. Shan.
Thanks, Olav. Hello, everyone. My project is aligned with the Transform program of the Centre. So the idea is to transform food waste by growing black soldier fly larvae and use the larvae grown on this food waste as feed for livestock. So the livestock in turn will be used as food for humans, and the food waste that gets generated in the process will be again fed to the larvae, thereby creating a circular economy with this black soldier fly larvae. So this larvae, when grown on organic waste, exhibits good nutrition potential, and it's got the right amount of amino acids, micro acids, and whatnot, making it a suitable animal feed. However, the commercialization of this concept is still at fancy because of the lack of specific regulations which governs their use as feed. So the main factor which found to affect the development of legislation is the lack of knowledge about the safety issues associated with this larvae. So my project involves growing this black soldier fly larvae on different food streams and analyzing their safety composition by scanning them for various chemical and biological contaminants that could be of risk to the livestock. So later, the safety threshold of different contaminants in the larvae will also be determined. So the main outcomes that I want to achieve with this project is to legislate the larvae grown on farmer foodstuff as livestock feed. So my ask is for collaboration with legislative bodies that's responsible for regulating livestock feed in Australia. So I believe this collaboration will help me understand the specific requirements for regulating black soldier fly larvae as feed, and will also provide me guidance in establishing the maximum tolerable limits for different identified biological and chemical contaminants in the larvae. Thank you, everyone, and back to you, Olav.
Thanks very much, Shan. And next up, we've got a colleague of Shan's, Mike, also from the University of Queensland.
Thank you, Olav. As Olav said, my name is Michael. I'm at UQ. I'm a PhD student, and I collaborate with Peter Wadowitz from Pete's Soils and Garden Supplies. So Peter and I recognise that there is an inevitable portion of food that will be wasted. So we want to collect that nutrient nutrient-rich food waste, and we would like to valorize that or transform that into these agronomic-based fertilizers. So we're attempting to produce these smart compost formulations. So not only can we reduce food waste or repurpose food waste, we can also help Australia transition into this circular nutrient economy. So this picture on your right here is our first prototype for these smart compost formulations. These have a full spectrum of nutrients required for optimal plant growth. So we believe that providing these soils with these nutrient-rich smart compost formulations, we are actually able to also stop biodiversity loss through agricultural land expansion. We've also designed them with the environment in mind, so more of these nutrients are ending up in our foods and less are ending up in our marine environments. But there is a problem. So Peter and I constantly face these plastics and rubbish contaminants associated with that food waste and other green organics. Next slide, please, Olav. So we believe this is largely avoidable. We know that consumers can recognise different recycling materials, things like plastics, glass, metals, and we want to transition that into things like food waste and other green waste. I'd really like to emphasise that cleaner composts also mean high fertility for our soils, greater environmental integrity, but also healthier foods. So my speed dating question is, how do we create change through policy? What is the first step to initiating the conversation to help cleaner compost and cleaner food waste? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mike. And turning now to Hannah from the University of Southern Queensland. Go for it, Hannah.
Thanks, Olav. Hi, everyone. My research topic is around optimising governance frameworks for converting horticultural waste into high-value products. So diverting food waste to high-value products through biorefining is one of the avenues for meeting Australia's food waste target. Specifically, FEL's recent food waste strategy feasibility study assessed that Australia will need to rely in part on extracting nutrients from horticultural food loss and waste through biorefining to get us over the line. As it stands, an industry for bioproducts hasn't developed independently in the economy here in Australia. So we will have to significantly increase production of bioproducts to optimise our contribution to food waste reduction, its contribution, I should say, to food waste reduction. If we take a look at comparative examples of biorefining industries abroad, it becomes very quickly clear that robust governance frameworks are required for industry growth. My research will examine the governance frameworks around the biorefining industry here in Australia. And the specific research question is, what policy frameworks would best support Australia to divert horticultural waste to high-value destinations while optimising the economic, environmental and social impacts? I'm still in the early stages of the research, but I'm proposing to undertake a qualitative research study, and this is where I'm seeking assistance. Early next year, I'll be embarking on framing questions for interviewees and seeking appropriate participants. And what I'm looking for here is subject matter experts in policy analysis frameworks, and in particular, optimising grounded theory methodology for policy research. Thanks very much. Over to you, Olav.
That's brilliant. Thanks very much, Hannah. And we have next up a colleague of Hannah's, Lee, from also University of Southern Queensland. Thanks, Lee.
Yeah, thanks, Olav. And good morning, everybody. My research topic is development of a techno-economic assessment tool for FOGO at a regional level. There's more and more activity happening in the FOGO area with councils in particular, which is collecting combined food organics and garden organics. And this results in diversion away from landfill, which is a worthy objective. And the general next step for this product is to put this the FOGO into a composting type facility. And again, that's another worthy solution, particularly for garden organics. But when we introduce food into the mix, which is a high value organic material, is it the best solution? So in the words of Tom Cruise in Jerry Maguire, it's like, show me the money. So there are a bunch of organic or proven organic processing solutions available, which include composting, anaerobic digestion, combustion, gasification, and then more importantly, a number of integrated combinations that can be pursued. And each has a range of advantages and products. And you can see some of those products in the bottom of the slide that's up on the screen. My project is to develop an analysis tool to navigate through this plethora of options and to find the one that's best suited to a particular FOGO feedstock and location. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is move the solution up the food waste hierarchy from landfilling to drive the most attractive solution for investment. So, and in turn, we want to drive a solution that recognises the inherent value in the food waste. So, thanks very much. Back to you, Olive.
Brilliant, Lee. Thanks very much. And next up, we have Danica, also from Central Queensland University. Go for it, Danica.
Thanks, Olav. Most people at one point or another have probably tried to take up a new hobby or get into a more consistent exercise routine. Most people have probably also experienced finding it hard to make new habits stick. I'm undertaking longitudinal research to see whether changes in food waste behaviour in the household last long term. Using behaviour change research, the study will improve the planning skills and practices of Australian households to enable people to reduce their food waste. Planning and flexibility around changes in plans are a priority area to address in household food waste, as they are linked to decreased food waste. My study will be a randomised control trial with a control group and 2 intervention groups. One group will receive messages in the form of social modelling. They'll be shown everyday ways of food planning that reduces waste, and they too will be encouraged to pick up these behaviours. The other group will have physical prompts to remind them to waste less food, emphasising the personal financial benefit and nudging them in a better direction in the hopes of forming habits. Both groups will be provided information on the social, economic and environmental impact of food waste to increase awareness and learn tips and tools to avoid edible food waste. Through surveys, the study will determine how often people engage in certain behaviours to see whether the interventions improve household food planning. In addition to measuring behaviours, participants will report their edible food waste at multiple points in time to determine the relationship between improving planning and food waste and see whether the interventions actually change behaviour. Lastly, after the interventions finish, behaviours and food waste will be measured again after a few weeks, then again after a few months to see if reductions diminish over time. So what I'm hoping for is to hear if anyone or any industry participants have any experience testing whether behaviour change lasts. Thank you.
Bang on time, Danica. Good. All right, so we are moving on to Esther, also from Central Queensland University. Go for it, Esther.
Thanks, Olav. Thank you indeed. Hello, everyone. As an ex-local government waste education officer, my specialisation has been in introducing FOGO, food organics and garden organics, curbside collection systems. Whilst avoidance remains top of the list, of course, diversion of food waste from landfill is an important component of achieving a circular economy. With food waste-related policy and funding now in place, there is perhaps an assumption that councils will simply deliver the required implementations and will stop sending food waste to landfill. However, as we know, this is a complex area. It's expensive, challenging, and time-consuming. It requires infrastructure and market development, high-level and ongoing community engagement, and considerable capacity within councils' waste management teams, who are, after all, ultimately responsible for introducing these types of household food waste interventions to their communities. My research focuses on the factors that influence and determine councils' food waste management system selection and implementation. All too often, these voices are not heard very clearly, and they need to be in order to support a holistic approach to stopping food waste ending up in landfill. Initially, I'll be running a series of interviews with council-based waste managers who have been or will be involved in the rollout of FOGO systems, as well as those who advocate for alternative approaches to food waste avoidance and diversion. What I'm looking for, my call to arms is, if you're involved in council waste management or know somebody who is, please put your hand up and talk to me, Esther. and I would love to have your input. Thank you so much indeed, and back to you, Olav.
Thanks very much, Esther. So we're going over to a different time zone now in Western Australia with Lynn from Curtin University.
Thanks, Olav. My project is focused on two things. The first is mapping shell and shucking waste in the wild harvest abalone supply chains across Australia. As you can see on this first slide here, about 2/3 of all catch is considered waste and is disposed of. And the second aspect of my project is finding opportunities along the supply chains to valorise that waste. So I'm quite early on in my research, but ultimately what I am keen to do is to make these supply chain maps marketable to industry, for lack of a better term. So for my ask, I'm seeking 2 different people or stakeholders who could help make that happen. So primarily, I'm looking to engage with someone who can provide some expertise on how to measure the impact of diverting the shell and shucking waste from landfill. And it would be fantastic if I could just pick your brain for about half an hour or 40 minutes on the issue, either over a video call or in person if you're in Perth. And secondly, I'd like to be able to present the supply chain maps to the abalone industry stakeholders in like an accessible, engaging way. So the second person or organisation that I'd like to engage with would have expertise in creating animated graphics. So similarly, I'd be very grateful to speak to you for about 30 to 40 minutes, either over a video call or in person if you're in Perth, about what's involved. So I know these are quite big asks, so even any suggestions or leads that you might have would be hugely appreciated. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to the outcomes of this project. So if you feel this is also something you'd be interested in, it'd be great to connect. Thanks, Olav.
Thanks very much, Lynn. And staying in WA, we'll turn now to Alexis.
Thanks, Olav. So my PhD is a hybrid based on my background, a combination of nutrition and food science. And my project is to investigate therapeutic potential of abalone waste. So a little bit of the background, there's already a few studies done on abalone waste health benefits, and the result is already very promising, showing some good results against disease preventions, especially after the waste is treated with enzyme, which enhance the effects against human disease such as cardiovascular disease, cancer, and inflammatory disease. And among all the health benefits, I found anti-inflammatory effect particularly interesting and decided to focus on it just because I believe it has great commercial value to be developed into a supplement which can enhance exercise performance, prevent aging, and potentially replace some other anti-inflammatory medication that can cause bad side effects. And so currently it is still not possible to make this supplement yet, just because there is still a lot of research gap and missing data related to the topic. And one of the reasons is that most of the existing study is done on abalone species in Asia, besides blackleaf abalone. None of the Australian species has been investigated yet. So even though the health benefit should be similar, we still have to do some research on it to prove the effect. And secondly, a lot of existing study are done in test tube or using cell, which are not very translatable to human body. And those data are almost like having zero value towards commercializations. Thirdly, no study have determined the toxicologies and safety aspect of abalone waste yet, which is required by the Australian law to be tested before a new ingredient is used for human oral consumptions. So that's why I'm doing this PhD. First, trying to find out the therapeutic benefits of abalone species, and then enhance it with treatment to make it more potent, then prove the benefits of them using animal models, and lastly, test the safety aspect of it following the existing guideline required by Australian law. By the end, if it goes smoothly, we should be able to make a supplement or close to make a supplement. So this is the end of my pitch. And since this is my first time of making a supplement, it would be great if I can have some guidance from a mentor who is experienced in this kind of work. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Alexis. And our final speaker is our newest student, Erin, who is from RMIT, which is where we began with Ruby. Go for it, Erin.
Hi, everyone. So for my project, I'm drawing on my background as an industrial designer to explore consumer behaviour change in made-to-order hospitality venues. Dining culture is increasingly linked to people's sense of self and community, and so eating out is becoming more frequent in individuals' routines. But unfortunately, 1 in 4 diners are leaving roughly 20% of the meal behind. And so plate waste is a normalised result of this culture. So I'm aiming to try and tackle this problem through exploration into design interventions that attempt to increase the normalisation and the desirability of taking leftovers home for later consumption when you dine out. So approaching this problem as an opportunity to create new value in what would otherwise be wasted food. This project aims to empower consumers whilst hopefully adding to rather than detracting from the joy of going out and eating and sharing food. So despite being in the very early stages of the project, it's pretty certain that there will be a container design element to the research. So what I'm asking for today is anyone from the packaging industry who would be interested in acting either potentially as a mentor or just an expert reference to help provide insights to guide the design development when it gets to that stage of the project. Similarly, if there's anyone from the food services industry who has insights and knowledge into plate waste management strategies that already exist within hospitality venues, that would also be great to get in touch with you. And then finally, I'd just like to use this opportunity as a plug and an open invitation for anyone interested in learning more about the project once it's more developed to attend my confirmation of candidature presentation, which will be in early February next year. So if you're interested, I'd love to hear from you. And thanks, everyone.
Thanks very much, Erin. And that brings us to the end of the 16 students. And I'm proud to say that we're actually running ahead of schedule. And one of the things that I've spoken to students most about in the last 2 years is the importance of speed in research. Industry doesn't have time to wait. Just one thing I want to emphasise before I hand over to Tangerine is that if you want to contact one of these students, I'm hoping you didn't spend half your time trying to peer at the email addresses there. You can either contact me or leave a note in the software that you've got on your screen in the Q&A session. The students will be sharing their details in that section as well in the next half hour or so. Tangerine, over to you.
Thanks, Olav. Wow, what an impressive group of future leaders. Congratulations to all of you for your excellent work in articulating your needs today to grow and develop as future leaders. As we know, the Future Leaders program goes beyond research, and we are focused on engagement, leadership, building your communication, innovation, entrepreneurship, and impactful skills. A key theme of the program is to develop enterprise thinking through industry engagement. And throughout this program this year, we've also worked with, Olav and I have worked with KPMG industry experts to look at how you apply feasibility and commercialization assessment tools to consider risk, impact, and benefits of your research projects. Today, our students have reached out to all of you. And as they progress through their research journey, Olav and I welcome your engagement through your leadership, your expertise, and mentorship with our best and brightest here, so that they can get a broader understanding and an application of a growth mindset, an enterprise mindset, so that they can use their evidence base to bring about change and have a lasting impact. So they've put a call out on various aspects, and we'll be delighted to work with you, to connect you with our students as you go on their research journey. So thanks everyone for listening, and over to you, Olav.
And I'll pass on in turn over to David, I believe. But yeah, it's been a real pleasure presenting to you, and the nerves have died down on all our parts. Thank you very much, everyone.
I offer my sincere appreciation to Olav, Tangerine, and the team from KPMG. It's really fabulous, the opportunities you are creating for our students. And I extend that appreciation to the students, to the hard work you are doing, and thank you for sharing that impactful research with all of us today. We now move to the third section of today's session, which is where I will give a brief overview of the Engage program. I'm extremely fortunate to work with both Gami and Alex. You've heard from Gami in the keynote presentation, and many of you will have had contact with Alex in her role leading communications and managing the Engage program. Much of what I will be sharing with you today is a direct result of the efforts of these two executives. The Engage program is being enacted across 3 frontiers of influence. The future industry leaders, which we've already heard from, upskilling the workforce, and changing behaviour in households. I will now go into the details of the particular activities being undertaken in each of these 3 frontiers of influence. The future leaders had the opportunity for their first face-to-face meeting earlier this year, and it was wonderful to see them together with that opportunity to network and to learn and to have industry visits. Recruitment of future leaders of these bright minds continues. We still have over 20 scholarships available. So if any of you have a research problem and you feel a PhD or master's student may be able to help, please reach out to the relevant program leader to explore that further. In relation to the productive workforce, the in-depth results from the research undertaken on the opportunities and gaps in training for employees around food waste was published in the Training Needs Analysis. In addition, the Industry Connection Hub continues to provide a forum for exchange of information in its monthly meetings. And households. A report published earlier this year by Food Innovation Australia highlighted the importance of households. It showed that around 1/3 of the volume of food loss and waste in Australia, as measured in kilograms, occurs in households. And when we measure this in terms of economic value, in dollars, it rises to being over half. What is it that we are doing in the Engage program around households? The first project is the one being led by Gami, which we've already heard about. The second one, Mark Bartel and his team are continuing to help Woolworths with their activities around reducing food waste. The third of these, the WWW project, we will hear more about from Rob in the panel discussion. And the last 2 are helping us to understand how this very powerful tool called social media can be enacted to help households reduce food waste. And that takes me to my final slide. Within the Engage program, we have been focusing our efforts on game changer projects. These need to be large projects, multiple stakeholders, substantial budgets, and enacted over a significant period of time. The nationwide consumer behaviour change campaign is an example of a game changer project. Last month, 50 food waste leaders from businesses, federal and state governments, industry associations, not-for-profit sector, and research community met for a summit. After 2 days of inspiration and sharing, it was agreed that a business model would be developed for a case for this campaign. And the team from Stop Food Waste Australia and Fight Food Waste CRC are facilitating the development of that. As Gami said in her keynote presentation, The key outcome from this nationwide behaviour change campaign will be providing consumers with consistency of messages. This message will be amplified for consumers by multiple stakeholders, and it will be repeated over a sustained period of time. All of this is necessary to change the deeply embedded habits and hence make it easy for all of us to stop wasting food. Thank you. We will now move to the panel discussion. I will start with a brief introduction to our 4 panel members. Mischa Hutchinson. Mischa is the Food Waste Program Manager at Woolworths. Rob Gregory. Rob is the General Manager at East Waste. Amanda Kane. Amanda is the Organics Manager at New South Wales EPA. And Gamithri Karunasena, our keynote speaker, who is the Manager of the Fight Food Waste CRC Household Project. Mischa, I'm going to start with you. Why has Woolworths become involved with Fight Food Waste CRC and Stop Food Waste Australia? What are the key benefits for Woolworths of these relationships?
At Woolworths, we see and we touch and we love food every single day, especially our store teams, and we hate seeing food go to waste. So Woolworths has been working on reducing and diverting and donating surplus food and food waste for a long time. And what we found is we were doing really great efforts in pockets, but we needed to take that to the next level and we needed to think more broadly. So our stores, yes, really important, but also the whole value chain. We touch a massive part of the value chain in Australia and we wanted to have an impact and we realised we could have an influence. So we joined the CRC and Stop Food Waste Australia. We signed the pact in order to come together with the right people in the industry and across industry to actually have that impact and to work together, because it's a problem that nobody can solve on their own. We have to work with our peers.
Thank you, Mischa. And your comment at the end there, it's a problem that none of us can solve alone, resonates very strongly with me. Now to you, Rob. Firstly, can you share with us what your organisation East Waste does and how the research being undertaken in Fight Food Waste CRC in the WW project that you're involved with, how is that going to be used by East Waste?
Thanks, David. Great opportunity to be here this morning. So we're a waste collection agency based here in Adelaide. We work across 7 predominantly metropolitan councils, responsible for just over 20% of the curbside collection. So we see a massive amount of household waste, and we also see a massive opportunity for increased food diversion. Across the board, we've got around about a 59% diversion from landfill, but we want to significantly increase that through food diversion. Fight Food Waste program that we're involved in is targeted at how we achieve that food diversion that we want to get to. So we know that our historical methods of education and so forth haven't worked. So we're looking for that step change. And in order to do that, we want to actually understand what's happening at the household level. And Trang touched on that a little bit earlier, the start of the research. So it's really exciting to see where we can end up in a couple of years' time with the outcome of that research and diversion of food waste.
Thanks, Rob. And it's lovely that you mentioned Trang, and that's a great example of where a research project is obviously addressing a need that you have. And as part of that project team, you've got a PhD student. So creating an opportunity for Trang to become one of the future leaders and get that very applied experience through the research
Absolutely.
that is undertaking. Now to Amanda. Amanda, collaboration is a foundation of both Fight Food Waste CRC and Stop Food Waste Australia. What are the real and tangible benefits for New South Wales EPA of working collaboratively in the consumer food waste space?
I think they're multiple and multi-layered as well too, in terms of our collaboration with the Fight Food Waste CRC and Stop Food Waste Australia. The data and the evidence, absolutely. The work that Gami and the team, and we've all worked together on this, and that really has been a collaboration in terms of providing that evidence for household behaviours and attitude. I think is a good example, because we've been tracking household behaviours and attitudes for ages, and we've known, as Gami said, there's the flaws in the research in terms of, people underestimating the amount of food they waste, thinking they don't waste at all. What the research has given us is actual evidence. It's multi-layered, and it was an investment that, even though New South Wales is very committed to this, that we alone couldn't have done. And now what we have is a really good foundation. And as we go forward, that's going to provide us with the ongoing tracking and monitoring. So the interventions that we do and the further work that we do will be informed by that national research, and it's much more robust, I suppose, in that way. So that's been really valuable. And in all of those presentations from the students, it was just brilliant. I'm thinking, we could collaborate there. We've got opportunities there. There was every single one of them. So I'm really looking forward to, some of them I knew about and some of them I didn't. But it's those sorts of ways that we're working together. As Mischa said, we can't do it alone. We've been working a long time on this and we've come a long way, but really feeling now that there's an opportunity and a platform for achieving this, getting to this halving food waste goal, because we're all working together.
Amanda, I hear the collaboration coming through very strongly, and the necessity of collaboration, and obviously the power that's attached through the collaboration. And I also hear the importance of research and creating the evidence, even if it's a very challenging task to undertake the research. And that gives me a great opportunity to ask Gami a question around the research. So Gami, in your presentation, you gave us a great sense of the scope and breadth, and hinted perhaps at some of the challenges involved in the research that you've been leading. And what is your vision for how that research gets used? Where would you like to see it going to?
Thanks, David. It's a timely question, given that we've completed most of the research work as well, David. So I think the basics to understand is, based on what we've done so far in the Household project, with the expertise of people like Amanda and the rest of the steering committees, we've got the latest evidence really specific to the Australian context, representing the national samples in most of the cases, around what products and categories are wasted, why they're being wasted, who is wasting, what behaviours we need to prioritise to make the greatest impact. And we know how to measure the impact of an intervention. So I would say, David, we have the whole package of insights any organisation need to develop interventions and test them and identify whether it's effective or not. In my view, and after the recent workshop on the national campaign, I know many of us agree on this, a national behaviour change campaign is a natural evolution of this research. And that's where this research would work as the initial insights to develop those ideas in the campaigns and the interventions. Until then, I think the next step is for different organizations such as state and territory governments, supermarkets, charities, and other organizations who is interested in reducing household food waste in Australia to take up some of those priority interventions and implement those, or at least sponsor some of the implementations. And when we're doing that, I think, as you and I both presented in our presentations, we need to make sure we deliver a simplified message around the behaviours that consumers need to adopt, to show that easy to adopt, amplify those messages. Most importantly, when we're working with different organizations, we must make sure we all deliver a consistent and a complementary message, not a contradictory messages, complementary messages, and we deliver it repeatedly. I think that's where that's where this research and the next steps to come would help reduce food waste in Australia.
Thank you, Gami. I'm hearing a very strong message that this research is available for everyone, and it forms a very powerful foundation for all sorts of organisations at very different touch points with customers to be able to get further insights to help improve the impact of the interventions that they're leading. And of course, the opportunity that's being developed through the nationwide campaign will give us all a forum where we can share and continue to build in this space. For the audience's benefit, you've now heard from the 4 panellists, and I invite you to type in any questions that you may have. And the system will allow me to see them, and then I'll be able to sift through those and synthesize them and ask them on your behalf to the panel. My next question is for Rob. Rob, your organisation is having direct contact with households on a regular basis through the collection of the council waste bins. We heard about contamination, and that's clearly a big issue, but I'm actually interested in a step before that. What do you see as the priorities for helping householders reduce the amount of edible, and I use that word specifically because there'll always be some inedible food waste going into the bin. So just thinking about edible food waste, what are the priorities around reducing edible food waste in terms of the households that you're interacting with?
Yeah, really interesting question, David. And to be honest, I don't think there's any silver bullet answer to that. You can see from Gami's research the diversity that it has, our research showing the diversity across households and demographics, and just the breadth of programs that the Fight Food Waste CRC is involved in. You can see right across the food chain there's touch points that we can get to. I think across the board, we actually just need to normalise food recycling and bring it back to valuing the cost of food, not just from a monetary perspective, but also from an environmental perspective that it impacts on. So we know that 98% of our households recycle cardboard, paper, and glass. But we've got almost 50% that undertake no food recycling at all. So we've got to get in and drive that behaviour change. I think one of the key things is driving and getting appropriate systems that maximise food recycling.
And a follow-up on that, Rob, I did draw this attention to inedible and edible food that goes in the bin. What's the rough split in your experience around the food that could have been eaten versus the inedible food? And by inedible food, I'm referring to bones and skin and peelings that we consider aren't suitable for human food consumption.
Yeah, so our household bin audit and some broader audits that we've done over the last couple of years show that it ranges between 2/3 to 3/4 of the food that's disposed is edible. So there's this enormous amount of either food preparation or food storage that isn't done well, and that's really shifted our thinking. We've focused our education heavily on using the right bin, but given that 3/4 of the food thrown out is edible, do we need to focus more on the front end with buying behaviours and storage behaviours? And for an organisation like us, local government, it's an interesting space to consider that's where we might need to target.
Thanks, Rob. Some great insights there from what's actually happening in households. Next question is for you, Amanda. You've already mentioned that New South Wales EPA has been in the space for a long time, and you've been leading that, and you've got a vast amount of experience with yourself and your team, and it includes Love Food Hate Waste campaign over many years, and of course Love Food communities and more. My question for you is, what do you see as the key benefits of the proposed nationwide consumer behaviour change campaign for your organisation?
Consistent messaging, critically, you know, that households everywhere will be getting the same message. The opportunity to take those messages and that program into all the way through the supply chain. I think that that's really important, because where Love Food, Hate Waste has been very successful, it's very much communication to consumers about their own behaviours and what they do in the home. The nationwide campaign provides an opportunity to connect with supermarkets at point of sale, on packaging, all of those other areas that can prompt behaviours. And we know that we need to do that, because we know how complex food waste avoidance behaviour change is, that it's the result of multiple complex behaviours. So if we can translate that into having opportunities to educate people all the way along the supply chain, so that, you know, when they're in the shop and they're looking at, they think they're able to be prompted on portion size, or when they're taking it out the fridge, they're prompted on storage, is all reinforcing the messaging that we're doing. And again, that's sort of building into collaboration. And there's always been a challenge as well with Australia being a federation, you know, with all the different jurisdictions, but businesses by and large, retailers, manufacturers are national. So I think it's also there about being able to work together on a consistent, clear, recognisable messaging that's going to really have the impact that we're looking for, and if we're going to help households save food waste and save money.
Amanda, I get the very strong impression that there's big advantages from the states working together and aligning with the powerful economic engine of businesses. And that gives me a great chance to ask Mischa a very similar question, which is, Mischa, I'm fully aware that Woolworths has been in this space for a long time and have made a lot of commitments and had a lot of success in reducing food waste in its three major areas of influence. So that's obviously within the stores, within their operations, back up the supply chain, and then, of course, further down the supply chain into consumers. So a similar question to you. What do you see as the major benefits from being part of a nationwide consumer behaviour change campaign?
For us, we're definitely the amplifier of the message. So we rely on the research to tell us what are the things that we need to tell our customers to do, and how do we align with those messages across the whole industry, just to make sure it's consistent so that everybody hears the same thing. So we definitely see that as our role. And in terms of the benefits, we are trying to bring the freshest, best, healthiest food to our customers every day. And if customers are throwing out their food because it's going bad, they're not getting the full benefit of that beautiful produce that we put on our shelves and send home with them. So it's really about ensuring our customers have the best food possible. It's making sure that our farmers get the best deal possible as well. So for us, it's about the whole supply chain coming together to enjoy the best food possible.
And I can see the power of the creating a forum where there can be that coordination, so that the messaging from the consumer's perspective has the consistency and has the amplification.
Absolutely.
Moving to a question for Gami. And Gami, in your keynote presentation, you've covered a lot of ground, and the area that seems to have risen to the most number of questions is around the scaling factors that you mentioned in your slide. Could you give us brief details of how they were determined and how they could be used by practitioners?
Sure. Thanks, David. I think, first of all, the important factor is measuring or evaluating the food waste is the number one. Food waste in terms of getting whether your interventions are working is number one. So having a pre and post evaluation is very important, because if not, we wouldn't know where we are heading and whether we've gone in the right direction. To do that, we have different tools. We have the surveys, electronic diaries, and the bin audits. As I mentioned in the presentation, the issue with the 3 is, so if you look at the survey, it underestimates the food considerably. We look at the electronic diary, that also does the same. If you look at the bin audit, it's accurate, but it only takes into consideration one disposal route. So what we did was, by taking the food waste through the electronic diary, we knew what disposal methods that food went into. So what we did was we removed from the electronic diary waste number. We deducted the disposal route that went in, the quantity that went into the disposal route bins based on the electronic diary. And then we identified the difference and we adjusted it to calculate a calculated food waste amount. And this was around 3.4 kilos per household per week. So then we have this calculated food waste number, which is not the bin audit, which is not the electronic diary, which is a calculated number. And this is what we think is more accurate, because we have all the disposal routes, plus we've added the bin audit number, which was around 1.78 or something. That's how we arrived at the 3.4 number. So what we did was then identified by the underestimation for the survey and the electronic diary as against the calculated waste number. And this was 1.7 for the survey and 1.2 for the e-diary. I think when I'm explaining it, it might be a bit hard to understand for someone because there's a lot of complicated calculation that goes into it. But if someone is really interested to know more about it, happy to answer any questions if they want to reach out to us. And the report will be published within a couple of months by the end of this year. So you would know more details around how the calculations worked and how each of the factors were adjusted. But for the time being, just to understand, it was based on a calculated, the initial idea was getting a calculated food waste, which was more accurate than the other two, and then comparing it against the two other sources of data and finding an underestimation value for that. I hope I answered it without making it more complex.
Thank you, Gami. Well, clearly those people who have a great interest in that space can reach out to you and read the report in detail when it arrives. In our last few minutes together, I'm going to invite Mischa, Rob and Amanda to have a final comment. So starting with you, Mischa.
Thank you. Some of you may have seen last week our CEO Brad Banducci talking on the SMH Sustainability Summit around the 2025 commitments. He spoke about how as soon as we printed them, they were basically out of date, and how we want to be more ambitious and we want to do more work in this space. So as that pertains to food waste, we've made some public commitments around donating food, all our edible food to charities at the back of our stores, as well as diverting 100% from landfill. But we are working to do a lot more, and we see the CRC as a really integral part of that.
Thank you so much, Mischa, and it's just fantastic working with you and the team in this space and having a real impact. Over to you, Rob, for a closing comment.
Thanks, David. Look, I think it's, to be honest, I think it's really exciting. We often present some really depressing figures in this space, but the reality is we're on the frontier of so much opportunity, and that's everyone that's on this call, including those that are just hooking into it, has got a role to play and can be so influential in making the change. You know, it is a piece by piece approach that we've got to get to. There is no silver bullet. State government agencies, what New South Wales is doing is fantastic. We're really lucky here with Green Industries South Australia that They provide great leadership, and the Fight Food Waste CRC is just invaluable in that process. But we've all got such a great opportunity to really influence where we go with food waste and make that big step change and make that big difference for the betterment of our environment and also the betterment of society in terms of the massive savings that financially can be achieved.
Thanks, Rob. And what a great sort of synopsis of the opportunity in front of us and this really special time. It's a real once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for us to be part of that collaboration, and particularly as we move towards the nationwide campaign space. Over to you, Amanda, for a final comment from the panel.
So for New South Wales, the new mandate, the waste policy mandate, and how food waste is fitting in is all increasingly connected with our net zero commitments and the halving food waste goal and source separation. And so that is going to be the major driver for us. And I think that there is going to be plenty of opportunities to work, particularly with businesses, in terms of using the source separation requirement in engaging them in food waste and then therefore in reducing food waste as well as recycling it, and households as well too. So I think that's going to be the next sort of frontier for us. But definitely within the work that the CRC is doing, tapping into what's happening on the national agenda, tapping into the pact, tapping into all those broader commitments in order for us to sort of deliver on those key programs which are going to be driving us over between now and 2030.
Thanks, Amanda. It's now time to bring our panel session to a close. A big thank you to Mischa, Rob, Amanda, and Gami. And that also brings to the end of the Engage session for this conference. It has been a pleasure sharing this time with all of you. And if there's anything that I've said or anything that you've heard, please feel free to reach out if there's anything that any of us can do to assist you. Wishing you all the very best in the fight against food waste.